All right, so I've got 2 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. This is a terrible chair to sit in. You hear yourself.
Vice Chair Baker, we do not have a quorum. So if the committee would like, we could continue with the reports. There was no requested action today. Would you like to proceed with the reports on various efforts?
I think we're all gathered here, so I think it'd be a good use of time. We can streamline it, but I wouldn't want to skip it.
That's great. Staff's prepared to do that.
Okay.
Michelle, can you give us a report on the shelter project and any of the funding? Has anything changed or any new aspects of that?
So I missed the meeting from last week, but construction continues to move along. I did meet with Katie and trying to think of her other name, I can't remember, on the funding. We're still continuing to talk about the additional funding for operational costs. After talking with them, it didn't sound like our initial funding is in danger by any means. And we're now looking at having another meeting with them to talk about just options, because they had asked us to go full-time. And I told them there's a lot of concerns about that, and just from more things than funding. Because just because we have all the funding doesn't mean we can still have all the resources that's needed to be able to do what they're asking. And it had sounded like we're not the only ones, that there's been the same concerns voiced from other communities. So I don't think we're in this alone. They just said at this time, they're not ready to go to the governor with everything quite yet and bring it up, that there's, concerns about more than just money, because even if we had all the money to operate it, that doesn't mean we have all the resources. So we're going to follow back up with them. I would like to bring Tony in on some of those conversations so he can voice his concerns from the faith-based network and kind of give them where you guys are the next time we have a meeting. We talked maybe in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Follow back up. So I'll reach out to you, Tony, to when we have that meeting.
That would have to be before the 14th of October or after the 26th. I'll be on vacation between.
Okay.
So just point of clarification, I thought I heard you mention that it doesn't sound like our funding is at risk right now. The additional funding.
Correct. Yes. We were concerned that if we couldn't operate full time, that they may pull that, and it doesn't seem like that is their goal at all. It's trying to figure out what we need to move forward to still meet the governor's goals for the beds, as far as what she put in place. So I think that's why the additional funding, there's another round of funding coming out that will be available in March for operational type things. And then because when we talked, and when this thing's open, you will by January, you almost will be probably close to full time, just because it's that time of year and that's when you guys are usually giving, shelter during that time. So correct. Correct. It's not full time, but they're operating every day, pretty much, in January.
Yeah, at the end of January, if that's when the center opened, we would normally be just a month and a half out from closure of the winter shelter portion of the project.
Right. So we're gonna again, like I said, we'll meet back up. I'll bring you into the conversation so we can start talking about it. I know you had we're still gonna meet with your board and talk about some things, so, we'll meet again and might put you together with a meeting with just us internally and then schedule something with COIC and see where they are.
Is there,
There's still, they didn't say that I don't think, so the funding, the extra million that we got for to complete the building, that's not in danger. I don't believe they haven't said that at all. And even Nick has talked to other parties at COIC, and that's not the conversation. It seems like the conversation is, okay, we're giving you this money to build the shelter. Now let's figure out how to do this. And if that means additional funding, then that means additional funding, because they do want it open. That is part of the governor's ask, is that we're giving you the funding to build. We would like to see it open. There were some different aspects that they talked about, that we may be open, but they may not require us to fill all the beds. It may just be a portion of the beds. They tossed out some different ideas of things. So that's it. Until we can get everybody in the room and kind of talk about it and kind of list all of our, I guess, barriers on things that we need, then we'll see from there.
I mean, I can be there representing the organization, but if there's an opportunity when we have that discussion, if I could have my board president and vice president there, it would help with the fidelity of their hearing on behalf of the board.
We could definitely.
Yeah,
work out.
that would be a request.
Yeah, we'll just plan on trying to figure out what dates work for
Mhm.
you, what dates work for them, and we'll just all get together and have that. So that way everybody's on board and they know where we're at.
Super, yeah, and then that way they can, inform the rest of our board and we can take it from there. Great, thank you.
are we still thinking a March 2024 application or some sort of request? Or maybe additional funding coming out from the governor's office?
Sounds like it. I don't know if they have they've thrown out March a few times. So I don't know if that's when the funding will be available to apply, or if that's going to be more of a, that's when you're supposed to receive it. I think they're still trying to figure that out.
Yes, I have a question, because I had thought originally we were needing to shoot for the January 9th or 10th deadline, but Ricardo in my last conversation mentioned the end of January. Does that put that money, that additional million?
It's for construction. Our construction contract shows January 24th.
Okay.
So, we probably could still even hit close to the January 10th. It may not be open for business, but it may be open as far as them finishing up some punch lists, you guys getting things put in place that needs to be, because once we hand you the keys, it's going to take you a little bit of time to get yourself organized and ready so that you can open the doors. So, I feel like they're flexible on that as long as we're close.
Oh, okay, great. Super.
All right, anything else for staff reports? Right, moving on then, looks like there was a report on public health data collection. Fortunately, Trent is out.
I think we were just looking for, at minimum, maybe a higher level overview of how you're collecting data, what type of information you're collecting, how that's stored, how it's accessed, maybe used.
Okay, and so that's a pretty good opportunity to talk about the way public health data is stored. Right now, our data is very program specific. So depending on what program someone had utilized services in, those are kind of siloed, unfortunately. A lot of the state reporting databases and local ones we have don't talk to each other. So if there's, for instance, Trent's programs are stored internally, whereas something like our clinic program is on electronic health record, and our birth and death certificates on our state database. And so it has been a little more cumbersome just to kind of gather data, so to speak, on homeless activities than we had first expected. I guess the ask then moving forward would be if there's specific information that we would like, or we do want that broad, high level, we can do that. But if there's something specific, how many clients are you seeing for substance use disorders, or how many clients are you seeing for reproductive health care? How many clients are you seeing for STD treatment and things like that? We can pull those numbers, but that have to be based on each program and each specific ask. So.
Yeah, I don't know that I got a sense from the committee or even anywhere else I talked to about the data, that there was a specific need other than making sure that the data collected is somewhat consistent in terms of the type of information being collected, so we can have similar reporting. So like, Molly Heiss with Neighbor Impact, she talked about having data being collected. And as a broad question, is the data you're collecting generally consistent with data they're collecting, so that you can have two separate data sets, but also have similar reporting, so you can do comparisons about needs and issues in the community?
In general, the numbers would probably be pretty similar, and the clients would probably be reflected as well. I think one of the benefits for public health is that we are required to collect data exact way all the time. So this year's data will be very similar to 5 years ago as we kind of look back and look through those numbers. It just depends on what our partners are doing. I know, like for instance, a couple of years ago, we participated in the point in time count. The last couple of years, that's been Tony and his team. So that might be a little bit different from what we did versus what's going on now. But in general, the data should be consistent and very transferable.
Nick, if I could weigh in on that. So I talked to Eliza Wilson. I had a meeting with her last Friday, and they're going to be trying to pull together an effort. They realize that Jefferson County, as well as I think it was the same in Deschutes, that you can't really consider that data a totally accurate number, that there was an undercount. So they're going to be trying, I think, to pull together a methodology to be able to get a better count this year, and they'll probably be pulling together some of us in the community. And I would think that would be a wonderful opportunity for Trent to be involved in that, as well as we are going to be required to be pulling together data for the homeless management information system, the HMIS system. So if you wanted to remind me, Nick, for next meeting, I mean, it's not like secret squirrel data. I could actually bring the form that will show you the type of data elements that we'll be collecting for that.
That'd be great. We can include it in the packet and have some discussion about it.
All right, nothing further from public health then. So we'll jump into the next. Tony, anything you want to add about data?
No, I think that's good enough.
Okay, so we'll continue on with the discussion of the homeless camping regulations transition plan. And which portion would that be referring to? Nick?
Well, we're starting to kind of operationalize that. Sorry, writing a note. Last week, staff met as a team, a city staff, and discussed, okay, what exactly do we see to be needed in terms of how the process will work, from the point that we know that we need to collect personal belongings, leaving the legality leading up to that point aside. How is that going to look like, or what's that gonna look like? And so what we've kind of, nothing is set in stone by any means, but you know, we need to find some city property, we can store it. We're looking at potentially 2 shipping containers in there. One might be used for higher volume. And so if you've got an individual that has a lot more personal belongings than another that, you know, can't fit in like a bin or a garbage bag or something like that, you could use one of them rather than mixing it all together, being a little more organized and thoughtful about that. We can be a little more efficient. And so we also went so far as to kind of start thinking about what those costs look like. And so, you know, round numbers, it looks to be, you know, $19,000-$20,000 to do that, just to get the equipment necessary and set up so that when you get to a place where you need to store one's belongings, you can do that in a organized manner. And then that will also allow the different departments of the city to work cooperatively together. For example, utilizing experience from the police department on cataloging the materials so we can document what has been collected, what has been disposed of, and then set up a system for figuring out when those collected items can be disposed of based on amount of time that's gone by, 30 days, for example, so that you don't start accumulating all this, all these materials. So we started that work. We have some more work to do in terms of just figuring out the details of it, as you can imagine. But one of our biggest challenges right now is figuring out that where we're gonna get the money in the city budget to do that. So
That was my follow-up question. You said 18 to 20,000. Is that are those funds included in any of the governor's executive order funding, or we have to find a way to find that money in current existing funding streams? Okay.
yeah, my guess is, you know, on September 25th is probably gonna have to come out of the community cleanup fund. And we're already using those funds in a very similar manner anyways. So what the implication would be is it may be that the city isn't able to fund to the extent we have in the past or want to other community cleanup related efforts.
If I can, part of the conversation weighed in, this is a very preliminary number. Because a couple things, the reason why it depends on how close the encampment that the storage facility is, because the costs haven't been figured in on how to move their stuff that they want to keep to the storage facility. So there's going to be not only just logistics and vehicle gas, but time. And then with the back end on that, I mean, Nick is just talking about stuff, tools and toys. And the other thing is how do we get it back to them? Because if we're doing 7 to 7, they're out of there. Well, I guarantee you by 5 p.m. they're going to be wanting somebody there to open the doors and give their stuff back. So again, are we going to transport it back to their campsite from wherever the box is kept? Are they going to be responsible for it? Plus, we're going to have at least 2 people there checking the stuff back out again. So again, we're just talking that cost Nick's talking about is just simply the things, the toys. And
The initial startup.
right, correct.
Sorry to jump in, but as you were talking, that spurred kind of a thought. You were mentioning as part of the cleanup process, the preliminary suggestion requirement is that at whatever hour all that stuff goes away. How do we keep this policy from becoming a locked storage, daily storage use for the campers who just might accumulate stuff knowing full well you guys will just take it, and then at the end of the day I can go pick it up again, and that's back and forth every day?
That's a good question. One of the things we pulled was from the city of Portland. And within their ordinances, there are specific definitions as to what is considered property and what is considered rubbish. So part of the thing in the policy for taking this stuff in is for us to be able to probably really strictly identify what is property, under a definition of what property is, its value, or its worthlessness, and what is simply rubbish. Because you're right, we could end up storing a lot of stuff that they may or may not, they could come back to the container and we'd open it up as an example, because I've seen this. And they'd get their stuff back out and they're just like, well, I don't want this stuff anymore. And they'll rip open the bag and dump it right there. So now we have that to deal with. So again, if we get it in here, then Portland, I look at theirs about what their definition of rubbish is and property is. I think it's a really good starting point, because you're right. How big do we want this to get? And how much control or how expansive do we want it? Because, I mean, are we going to allow them to bring pallets and we're going to store a pallet until they come back at 7 PM to take a pallet out? So again, we have to, I think, define what it is that we're going to take in and what it is we're simply not going to take in.
Those
And-
type of materials would not necessarily be allowed though in an encampment going forward, correct? Or no? I mean, or if we're saying that they can't now build structures with wood and pallet and such, one would expect that that would not be allowed, correct?
Correct.
That's a good point. Then again, it would go into, I mean, Portland's documents, what, I think, how many pages is it? Because it also goes through and defines what can be allowed in an encampment. And then who's going to be the camp host to make sure that they don't bring any of that stuff in. So that's, I mean, we have to have a control point, and I think probably one of the best control points would be, what is it we're going to store? And then anything that's left in the camp that they can't take away, such as a pallet, if it falls under the definition. Because if you look under here, it goes through a lot of stuff that's like, that's probably a pretty good thing that we don't have stored in here, and that's probably a good thing that we don't take in there, and you go through that. So if there's going to be a control point or a gatekeeper letting them bring things in to the encampment or not, that's going to require a body. And so then it gets, again, just what is the expectation of the control?
But, and so my understanding is, well, first of all, the statute says with these items that have no apparent value or utility or are in an insanitary condition may be immediately discarded upon removal, right? So in my mind, yes, initially you are maybe going to have several situations where you remove some things. You also discard some personal belongings because they meet the definition there of being eligible to be discarded. And then over time, that'll probably diminish, because what's going to happen is these individuals will also learn themselves what they cannot bring, what their rules and expectations are, so on and so forth.
Right, and I think it's probably a value of us, and that's why I referred the group to this, is that under one of the sections here, it's and I think there will probably have to be something, it's under 5B. I think it's actually, they got it missed on small letter E. Said the city will, it goes through and it says the city will not limit the number of articles of personal property stored at any individual person. So kind of like, well, then if somebody, and under Nick's definition under statute, what is a value? I mean, the statute says what is considered, of no value. So it's kind of like, well, that's a pretty broad definition, because a broken shovel to you could be of a whole lot of value. And to me, it's something that needs to be recycled. So it's of no value. So again, whatever we settle on, the language that we use, we have to have a clear expectation set, and it has to be communicated that you've walked down through there. One camp alone would fill up, small 30-yard dump box. It's like, we're not going to, and they may say it's a value, and it's like, well, okay, so what are we going to take?
Yeah, so remember, this is a slight distinction here would be, this is the city of Portland's policy,
Sure.
not adopted in regulation.
Yeah,
So
it's not. And that's the point. Good point. Is this, we have to be careful how we craft ours, because you live and die by it once it's penned.
Yeah, so we don't have a policy yet.
Right.
So we're not required to follow Portland's policy. We can adopt our own if needed. And that policy can be changed over time as the council or this committee determines appropriate. It's probably something we need to start working on with our legal counsel. Absolutely. Go ahead.
I think one thing that Mike was saying though, that I don't think we've really addressed is how do we make it so that they just don't use us as a storage unit every day? Knowing that we have to store their stuff. And I don't think we've really talked about that or addressed that, is how do you make it to where they know we'll store it, and like you said, they're gonna come back at 5 because they don't wanna pack around their tent and their sleeping bag all day. Oh,
Right.
the city of Madras is gonna hold it for us, and we can just go and get it at the end of the day.
Under our homeless camping ordinance, it does identify the requirement that they provide at least 24-hour notice to the city. So if Mr. Sneed left my belongings behind and somehow the city became into possession of those, we catalog that, we store it, they need to give us 24-hour notice before we're required to give it back to it. Could we do it sooner? Sure. Based on staffing and otherwise. So when we take these possessions, take possession of these personal belongings, there isn't in our existing ordinance a requirement that we immediately make them available.
All right, more to come. All right, so I also see a section today about review of closure removal notices. Do we have that?
Yeah, we have it here on the screen. We have worked with our legal counsel on this. So what you're seeing is both, of course, the English and Spanish versions. We've polished some of the language up. In particular, there was one community used some terminology that we thought was helpful, going back to what the definition of what is, what can be discarded, or what can't. And so we polished it up. There was a slight difference in terminology where they were looking for the term, where was it here?
Disposed versus
Discarded versus disposed of. And so there's some slight change in terms there that appeared to be helpful to staff and others involved. But really the statutory definition really is what matters in the local ordinance. So these have been finalized. We believe they are ready to be used. In fact, I reported to our planner and I believe the police chief. We had a small encampment off of J Street near Willow Creek. And there was concern for that, or for those staying there that during inclement weather that it wouldn't be safe. And then also being in close proximity to the city's south wastewater treatment plant. And then the fact that the water being irrigated there is actually coming from the plant. So there's a health concern. So these notices are ready to go. So you could even use them in that situation as well, because it's not a designated camping area.
There's the B Street address. That's a public works.
Yeah, that's our shops down here on B Street, on the west end of B Street.
And what's the number for the Jefferson County Homeless Outreach Program?
So I don't have that. Looks like we're missing a digit there. Good catch. But it was my understanding that staff worked with Tony to get some of these resources or the technical information regarding the resources. Is that not correct? Did you help us identify the different resources that may be available to our homeless individuals that are listed on one of the sheets?
Fatima, we helped her put together her like a resource directory.
Yeah.
And does that phone number look familiar to you, Tony?
No, I don't know what that number is.
We'll double check that as well. So
Outreach program. Yeah.
Well, we set up the notices.
That's after we take it in. If they don't come back and get it, and then that's unclaimed personal property, the stuff we've already taken into storage. They don't come back to get it, then allows us to be able to dispose of it.
Generally speaking, these notices are set up to communicate if their personal belongings are taken, where they can go, how they can get them, that sort of thing. That's actually the easy part. The harder part's actually pulling it off, storing them, and so on and so forth. That's what we were talking about just a few minutes ago. Not yet. No, I think we've already. Public Works has already
I
talked
think it's
with
already posted, isn't it, out there for them not to be there?
Yes, it is, and I've actually just worked with, Tim's team to try and, they've been talking with them, explain to them that with the health dangers and things like that, and from what I understand, they've agreed to move, so we're hoping we don't really have to use the notice, that we can just talk with them, explain that. Yeah.
Um, plowing through here, looks like we're looking at our next meeting times. We're still on
I
schedule.
believe
for-
that's October 23rd, 2 p.m. And we always try to get the call for agenda items for next one, so we can, Tony, if you could share with us your data collection sheet, we can put that in the
Yeah, I'll get
packet.
it to you
Yeah.
ahead of time. I won't be able to make a 23rd meeting. I'll still be on vacation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the sheet will do just fine. We should be able to glean what's going on there. We'll have a continued discussion on, working on, setting up the, storage of personal belongings and where we're at with that. Anything else that, the committee would like on the agenda that comes front of mind?
Immediately, we can follow up in the next couple days to.
Sure.
Up the time.
Absolutely. Or, just up to about a week before the meeting.
Okay.
We can always add
Okay.
agenda items.
And we're still at the same, not asking people to move or any of that stuff until after the stuff is open. Of the existing camps to move their big pallet homes and
For all intents and practices, yes. Legally, I think we can, but, I think we're gonna have a more difficult time from a humanity perspective.
Well, in cases like you just identified, when there's immediate health concern, asking them to move appropriate, we're not
Yeah.
kind of displacing them, so to
Yeah.
speak, so.
There's also logistical challenges associated with that we've talked about today.
Okay. And then looks like I jumped the gun here, so I'll go back up to a couple bullet points here and see if there are any folks today that would like to comment. Now's your opportunity, speak now or forever. hold your peace.
At this meeting.
At this meeting. Yes. Nothing, gentlemen? Appreciate that. Always open to that kind of public comment.
Yeah,
We don't get that
totally,
enough,
yeah.
so. All right, any additional discussion for this afternoon? Hearing none, I'll move to adjourn 2:35. All right.